Then we can stop this at any time and then come up, starting it again, right?
Yes. We won't stop the tape, but you can just talk to me. I can edit parts out.
Okay.
Okay?
So I can say something and it'll be taped out. I mean, if I want to ask you a question
Yes.
that
Yes.
we don't.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. So you can feel comfortable. We'll just talk back and forth.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to ask you about your wartime, about being captured, about your wartime adventures, but also a little bit about what happened when you came back. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
How we doing?
Okay.
Okay, Bob. Tell us your name and about your military background.
Okay, I'm Robert E. McVoy from Poland, New York. I served in the Army from April 29th, 43 to September 21st, 45. I was a T5 in a service company of the 106th Infantry Division, 423rd Infantry. I was in World War II in the European theater. I was awarded a Purple Heart Medal and 2 Bronze Battle Stars. I was inducted in Camp Upton, and I can remember going out on the railroad out to Long Island on that rickety track. And then I was sent to Camp Atterbury, Indiana for basic training. From there I was sent to this Army Specialized Training Program, supposedly to be an officer, which I never got to be, never got that far. And at that time I was sent to the University of Alabama, and that was the Garden Star of America. We had 500 Southern Belles and 50 fellows. And everything was going beautiful, so one morning we woke up and we were all transferred to the 106th Infantry Division. That afternoon, no preparation, just pack your bags and get on the train, and we went to Camp Miles Standish in Massachusetts. From there we took the Queen Elizabeth to Europe. They said we were met by several German subs, which I never saw. But anyway, we landed in Greenock, Scotland, a beautiful grassy thing. And we took the train from Greenock down to London. And of course, at that time, everything was blackout, but I couldn't believe the locomotive was spilling flames all over. It looked like a skyrocket going down the track, but yet we couldn't smoke or anything. After we got to London, we went to Plymouth and went across the English Channel. That was in an LST. And then I can remember at Le Havre, we landed at Le Havre, and I remember in Le Havre there was a whaling vessel with a big track in the back, and that's where they brought the whales up and then butchered them up, I suppose. And that thing had been there for years, but it looks like. Anyway, we went up the Seine River. And after we got up there a little ways, the Germans started, they had these pillboxes on each side of the river, and they opened fire on us. We couldn't, they let us get past the first ones, but then when we met the next ones, they opened up the fire up above it, and then we couldn't back up because we were wreckering. And so anyway, we ended up going up the river. After we got up there, we, let me see where the weather was very overcast, foggy and snowing and everything, and they couldn't do any reconnaissance by plane because they couldn't see anything. So they sent 2 of my buddies and I on a reconnaissance patrol to find out what was going on. Well, we found out, but we never got back to tell anybody. The Germans had taken their tanks from the Russian front and put them into St. Vith, Belgium. And there was, I don't know, hundreds of them. And as, trying to get this in order. Anyway, the tanks came into St. Vith and lumbering in. And as they come up to a house, they would put their guns down and blow the house up. And they blew a whole row of them up, and when they got to the house that the 3 of us were in, we decided we better get out of the house because we would be blown up. So we got out of the house, went down into the area there, and that's where I first met Herb Linke, the tank commander of the German Panzer outfit. And he captured us. We were trying to get this in order here. Now we we were marched back up they're trying to get us into an interrogation camp so we could be interrogated. And of course, we didn't really know an awful lot what was going on anyway, except we knew that the Germans were coming. So anyway, at night, I can remember being in these pillboxes that the Germans had built. And we were way down underground, and of course our Air Corps was bombing these things, and I was just hoping and praying that they made a good job of it, because it sounded just like rubber balls bouncing on the roof. Then in the daytime, they started marching us back into Germany.
Describe the pillbox for me. You said it was like rubber balls.
Well, I mean, you've seen these things on television, the battles and stuff, and that's the way it was. We were way down underground, and there was all kinds of corridors off and stuff, and you could hear the bombs bouncing on the roof, and we were just hoping that and praying that it wouldn't come through the roof, and they didn't. So then they started marching us back in, and I can remember if you fell out of the march, I mean, nobody waited for you. In fact, you were shot there or bayoneted. I mean, you just laid there and that was it. And I started to fall. And this voice came to me, and he said, "Bob, you can make it." And someone took my hand. It was my Lord Jesus Christ. Grabbed my hand, and I was able to continue that march. We finally got to Limburg, the interrogation camp. When we went through interrogation, in fact, I got stuff over there I can show you. I made a little pouch for my watch, and I hung it around my neck with my dog tags. And I also had my Sigma Chi fraternity ring and another ring with a kind of a Western saddle on it. And when we went through the interrogation, they took all this stuff. But when the guy saw this around my neck, he says, "Religious?" I says, "Yes." And he never touched it. And in the Army pants, there's a kind of a V-shaped thing here on there. And I slit that with a razor blade and put my 2 rings inside of there, because I knew money was no good to you, but you could swap these rings for something to eat or possibly escape. That was another thing. We had planned on escaping this ever since we met each other. So, now I've lost my...
Tell me about who you were with when you were captured.
Who I was with?
When you were captured.
Well, with my 2 buddies, Bill Ulin and Bob Reid. We were lucky. We did get separated several times, but mostly we were together, which was a big comfort. I had met them in basic training, and that's who I was with. I'm just trying to, let me cut this off here a minute.
Okay. You can go back to it.
Okay.
So they had marched you, and you got up from your march. You felt the strength of the Lord to help you go on.
Right. When we were in the, let's see, okay, I have another thing that we were issued a 1 blanket, and I had the only needle in the prison camp that I knew of, and I never sewed before in my life. I couldn't. But anyway, I took in socks and sewed the socks were worn holes from them. And I took the thread out of the edge of the blanket and used that to sew the socks up. And guys would swap cigarettes, or they'd swap stuff to eat for cigarettes. I mean, that's how bad that cigarette thing can be to you. I swapped it for something to eat, try to get, in fact, I lost about, I guess, 70, 80 pounds. So, now we got to get back in. In this camp, we had bread that was made out of sawdust. and also had raw horse meat, which had turned black. And we were able to cook the horse meat some. We had a little fireplace, and we cooked that to be able to eat it, because it really was tough eating that raw horse meat.
Did you endure a lot of sickness because of these things?
At that time, yes, I guess, but I can't remember just how sick I was. The main thing we were thinking of is how to get away, and get back to our units. Also, the only latrine we had was a 15-gallon bucket, and that was overflowed most of the time. And I'll never forget, there was a British. See, we did have a doctor there in the camp, and he was from England. And this POW doctor, he looked at us. He says, "You fellows are all going to be dead next week," and that didn't help matter very much. He looked at us. He says, "You're never going to make it." But we fooled him.
What was your plan? You said you were thinking a lot about how to escape. What was your plan?
Well, we wanted to stay in this camp. In other words, this wasn't too far back into Germany, just across the Rhine River. And we knew if we could get away there, then possibly we could get back into our units. But if we got any further, see, if we were shipped out of there, you were shipped to a concentration camp or a work camp. And from there, you never could get away. But we had heard rumors that it was possible to get away from where we were. Finally, the Yanks crossed the Rhine River, and of course, you hear all these rumors even in the prison camp, and we knew they had crossed the Rhine River. So we were in this POW number, you were given then they would call your number, and you were supposed to get on a boxcar and be shipped out. But we never answered to our number. We always hid out somewhere when they were looking for us. So after the Yanks crossed the Rhine River, the Germans knew it, and they didn't want us to get liberated. So they loaded us in boxcars and started shipping us back into Germany. Now these boxcars, the Red Cross boxcars, they put their ammunition in. The ammunition trains, they put us in. And when our Air Corps saw this train going up the track, loaded with ammunition, they thought, they blew up the tracks, then they blew up the train. They strapped, I can remember looking up at the ceiling and seeing these holes as these 50 caliber bullets were coming through the roof. You could see where they were coming right down into the thing. And one went right up through this friend of mine's arm and out through this loaf of bread that we were eating. So they finally unlocked the boxcars, and they let us out, and then they started marching us back into Germany again. It was during this march that the three of us escaped. We hid in this barn. It was a farmer's barn. It was a farm, and it also had a lumber mill. And I can remember hiding under a haystack on the side of this piece of machine. It said McCormick Deering right on the side of it. And when they came in with these machine guns, they machine gunned the hay mow and all over, and then they had flashlights looking. And I know my eyes don't shine in the dark, because I can see that flashlight, the light right there. Of course, we were so dirty and hair and everything that I guess we blended in with everything. But they never saw me, or if they did, they walked away. So they walked away, and we were able to hide out there for I don't know how many days. And I can remember eating sugar beets. Now, they were feed. That's what they fed the cows. And when you eat white sugar beets, it's white going down, and when you get to dispose of it, it's white coming out. And after you've eaten those for several days, you would like something else to eat. In the meantime, we had picked up another fellow that was really, see, we had gangrene in our feet. They were frozen, the blood was running all over everything. And they had no bandages. We were given crepe paper, and they did our feet up in crepe paper. Well, you walk down anywhere with crepe paper and blood running out of your feet, and there isn't much protection. So anyway, this other fellow that we happened to pick up, we had to get him to a doctor, plus we needed to too. But then, anyway, the farmer says, there's a doctor here in town. You go down, and he told us where it was, so we went down. And he did treat us. I don't really know if he turned us in or whether the farmer did, but right after that, the home guard started looking for us. And they looked up and down the streets and all over, but we were lucky to hide out. After that, just trying to think. I've lost my train of thought here a little bit.
Well, they were looking for you, though.
Yeah, okay, they were looking for us. And then the Americans finally got into the town, and we, of course, rushed up to them, and they didn't know who we were, but they must have known that we weren't, that we were prisoners of war because by the looks of us. But anyway, they took us to Army Hospital, and from there we got out. The wounded POWs were able to fly home. The other fellows had to come by boat. As we were flying over Greenland, I can remember looking out the window and seeing this oil spurting all over the side of the window. We had broken an oil line. And the plane came down, and luckily we were able to land at an airfield up there, and they fixed the oil line, and we got back on the plane and headed for America again. And we were going over Syracuse, and I went up where the pilot was, and he was from around Syracuse, and he was pointing me to things. I looked out, and one of the engines was starting to sputter and stop, and I just instinctively, I started running for the tail end of the plane. I don't know where I thought I was going, but I headed for the tail end. And somehow or other, he was able to come. He had forgotten to turn the gas over to this engine, I guess, and he got it running again. And we took back off. And landed at Griffiths Air Force Base. And I was taken over to Rhodes Hospital. And at that time, I weighed about 90 pounds, I guess, and ordinarily weighed around 150. But when when you have grass suit and sawdust bread, you don't put on an awful lot of weight. There was a lady came in. She was a Red Cross lady, and she looked at the name on the bunk and on the bed, and she says, "You're Robert McVoy?" And I says, "Yes." She says, "You remember taking my daughter out when you were in Union College in Schenectady? You met her on the train and you brought her home?" And I says, "Yes, I do." Well, she says, "I'd like to invite you over for dinner some night." So some night I went over and had dinner. And in June 19th, 1948, I married her daughter. And now getting back, that was about the, now we're getting into Herb Linke, the German talk. We had a fellow running a big lumber company in Poland, George Kingsley, and he had a book with a list of people that wanted to come to America, and also it listed the person and what they had done in Europe. And his father had run a lumber mill. So Kingsley saw it, and he said to his wife, "Why don't we sponsor him?" So they sponsored Herb Linke to come to work in the lumber company in Poland. And while he was at the company, he'd been there for quite a while, he needed an automobile, and he come up and was looking at the used cars, and I noticed his accent was kind of a German accent. I said, "You were in the German army?" And he said, "Yes, I was a tank commander of the Panzer outfit." I says, "Where were you in December 17th? He says, "St. Beth." The hair on the back of my neck stood up just like a dog. I've never had it happen before or since. So we got talking and got to be friends. He didn't want to be there anymore than I did, I guess. So we have what they call a Battle of the Bulge Club, and in Utica, and I sponsored him in the Battle of the Bulge. As far as I know, he's the only German in the Battle of the Bulge Club. And that's about it, I guess.
How was he received by others in the Battle of the Bulge Club?
Well, when I mentioned it to the club, and they weren't too enthused about having me bring it here. In fact, guys, a couple of them were very, which I don't blame. So, but anyway, I brought him, and he got talking with the fellows, and he told us a lot of things that we didn't know. One thing, I never realized that their tanks were far superior to ours. And he knew because he was in the tank corps. But in fact, when I go to meetings, and if for some, he's been in the hospital having hip operation. If he isn't there, they all want to know how he is. So they have kind of adopted him again.
I was wondering what his reaction was. You said that when you first realized who he was, and you said you felt the hair on the back of your neck stand up. What was his reaction when you told him who you were?
I really don't know. I mean, I suppose he was a little, I don't know what you'd call it, upset or what, but because it was at that moment that we both realized that we were there December 17th.
Tell me a little bit about after you married your wife. You met her after that meeting, that dinner meeting. And tell us about your life together after the war.
Well, we had a very good life. We have a daughter and a son, and I have two granddaughters that are both in Salt Lake City. One of them got married about last year in Salt Lake City, and the other one is being married Tuesday morning in near Salt Lake City. So I am not going out to the wedding, but my son and my daughter and some of the family are going to fly out to the wedding.
How much did you talk about your war experiences with your family?
I never said anything. You're the first one that I've ever heard this. I just wanted to forget it. I mean, it isn't something. I mean, I've told you a few of the bad parts, but there's some things that I would rather forget.
Do you notice, or how much do you notice that in others who've been through similar experiences? Other men or women who've been to war. Do you share some of that kind of information with them?
Well, at the meetings, like we have a prisoner of war meeting and a Battle of the Bulge, and we do talk a little bit about things different. In fact, sometimes when you first go to the meeting, they ask you for some of your experience, what outfit you were with, and where you were during certain dates and stuff. But I would say that the majority of the people really would rather forget it. At least I would.
Okay, now how old were you when all this was going on? When you were a prisoner of war, how old were you?
I'm no good at dates. You should have prepped me on that one.
Oh, okay.
But I was about 20, I guess, 18, 20. I was in college in 17, 18, and and nobody had planned on this war, I guess. But you realize that when there is a war, inevitably you have to serve in it. And
how did it change you?
I don't know what I would have been like if I hadn't been in the service. I mean, I learned a lot of things in the service that I wouldn't have learned if I hadn't been in the service.
What was the hardest thing for you about going into the service?
Well, I think the worst experience was that morning we woke up, and 50 of us were having to leave those 500 Southern Bells, and that really was a blow. But that wasn't the worst experience. But I remember that one the most.
When you came back, what was it like? You're done with these,
Yeah.
right? I'll take those.
I was just thinking might be something I'd want to. I guess we've gone through it.
We went through them. There were a few
Yeah.
details, but I think that those aren't the, I think you hit on the most important things
Yeah.
from it, yeah. But I was gonna just take that from you so that you can just talk to me. What was life like here in the Mohawk Valley when you came back from the war? Do you remember?
Oh, I mean, we had gas rationing and food rationing and everything. It wasn't, I mean, things were different. I mean, there was no new cars. There was, everybody was kind of conserving things. You weren't throwing stuff away. You saved your shoes. You saved, you wore your clothes more than you would if you can go out and buy some. And I think in this area, people were kind of more together, like. But I would have hated to live in New York City during that thing. I can't imagine that you wouldn't know your next door neighbor and anything to share your food or something. And,
So you found that people were pretty neighborly and there was a lot of sharing at that time?
yes, there were. Of course, in a small town like Poland, people used to share things. I mean, every town has changed. I mean, now we don't know some. I'm ashamed to mention it, but there's people on my street that I don't know, and I could have told you everybody in town when I left in the service, but I can't tell you now.
Tell me some of the things that you think are very important for young people to know about the service that you gave and many others gave during World War II. What do you think it's important for them to know?
Well, I think it's important for them to know that there were a lot of people that gave their lives so that they could have free speech and do things the way they want to. And if we don't do that, I think we're going to be in trouble again, which nobody knows, or at least I don't know, just what's going to happen now. But I really hate to see us get back in another war, mainly because the previous wars have never accomplished anything, in my estimation. I mean, but I guess we have to have them to straighten things out, supposedly, for a while.
How would you summarize what did World War II accomplish?
I truthfully can't say as it really did an awful lot, outside of that we lost a lot of young men and women in the service. But the only thing, I think it got people to know to depend on each other, which they might not have if they didn't have a war. I mean, people were sharing rides to work and sharing food and stuff. I think that's one thing that helped.
How did you deal with the memories? What you tell us sounds like it was pretty awful when you went through it. How did you deal with that when you came back?
Well, you just try to forget it, I guess. I mean, when anybody mentioned what did you do, or you just tried to get on another subject. And there were a lot of fellows saw a lot worse things than I was very fortunate. But everybody had nightmares, and you woke up in the middle of the night, and if you heard a plane come over, you'd have a tendency to kind of duck under a table or something. But this was when you first came back. I mean, you gradually got, at least I did, got kind of acclimated to things.
Is there anything that happens or anything that is mentioned that actually brings it rushing back even now?
Well, yes, when I see these newsreels and stuff, I think of these poor guys. I mean, the thing of it is, we were more hand-to-hand stuff, but now with all this pollution and stuff, and and being able to kill hundreds of people with some of this stuff at the chemicals and stuff. That it's really a different type of war than I fought.
You were face to face. You were face to face.
Yeah, I mean we saw when I see this guy coming. I mean he was after me and I was after him. But today you don't, by the looks of things there, you don't see the thing. I mean, if they let some of this gas and whatnot in the air, you never see the guy that's doing it.
Why don't you tell me a little bit more about your German friend and how you got to form this friendship? I think people would be very intrigued by how you formed a friendship with this man who captured you and put you into this horrible life.
Well, I mean, you can carry a grudge so long, I guess. And in talking with him, I mean, he was brought up in this German youth program, and his father was a real Nazi. In fact, I think he was number 1,500 out of thousands. And I have pictures of his father with all kinds of medals and stuff. But now I lost my train of thought here. What?
How did you develop this friendship with him?
Well, I was trying to sell him a car, for one thing. I didn't want to get on the bad side of him. And so anyway, we talked about the car, and I sold him that one. And then through that, in servicing his car and talking with his wife and stuff, and we got to, we just, once in a while we go over a few things. Like he was able to take all kinds of pictures, which I couldn't even carry a camera in the outfit I was in. They didn't want to do any, but he had a lot of pictures of the war that I had never seen. And he told me things that I had never realized. I mean, he was marching with Hitler. Say Hitler was over there and he was here marching. He was telling about, I mean, they were goose-stepping and stuff. And so, and I really don't, I mean, it wasn't a question of whether he wanted to be in the service, or in my case either. You were called in the service and that's what it was. So I think, I mean, I didn't like the idea of what he did, but by the same token, he was told to do this, and you either did that or they shot you, I guess.
You said that you didn't think that World War II accomplished anything, and yet you spoke of Hitler. What do you think would have happened with Hitler had there not been a war?
I don't really know. I'm not. I don't delve enough into that to know what was going on. I know I talked with Linke about this, and of course the Germans all thought it was somebody else's fault. It wasn't their fault that they were doing this, and that's the way they were brought up.
If you were going to talk to a child, like my child asked me at one point, "Mommy, what's a Nazi?" And if you were going to talk to the child and answer that question, what would you say?
Well, that was a belief that these people were brought up to hate the Jews and to consider that Germans are a superior race and that everybody else is inferior. I guess that's the way they were brought up. Not that that was the right thing to do, but I think that's, I mean, there's Nazism, there's other ism, different countries have different things.
And how do you feel about the Americans stepping in to get rid of that?
I really don't think that we should be trying to settle everybody's troubles. I mean, we've got a lot of troubles in this country, in my estimation. And I think we better get some of ours, some of the children educated and being able to be educated. And I mean, it's all right to take care of your neighbors and stuff, but you shouldn't be taking care of the guys that live the next town too, I don't think. I think we really got to take care of the American people more, especially the children and our elderly, which I'm getting to be, I guess. I hate to think of it, but
Do you have any regrets?
no. No, I would hate to go through it again, but I consider it was a part of my life. I mean, I don't really regret it. There's a lot of things that I really enjoyed. In fact, meeting my wife was one of them. Yeah, if I hadn't, of course, if I'd have been I was going to Union College, but if I'd have stayed there, I don't know what would have happened, rather than go in the Army. But there's a lot of nice things happen too, but there's a lot of bad things too.
Is there anything else that you think needs to be documented? Anything else that you would want to say about being in the military, about being in World War II, that you think people should always remember? What should they always remember?
Well, as I mentioned before, I think they should realize that there were people before them that did a lot of sacrificing so that they would have the things that we have today. I think they should be brought to mind to realize that people gave their lives and that was everything, so that the next generation would be able to be free.
From right here in the Mohawk Valley, right?
Right. I wouldn't. I really enjoy living here. I never lived anywhere else outside of here, but I think it's a great place.
With a lot of great people who contributed a lot.
Right. Sure.
That's good. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, just jot down memorabilia from this time code.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going, Mrs. Carroll.
Okay.